Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Jake Fredendall. Jake, how are you today?
Doing great, Mr. Cool. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great. For our audience, the reason why I say Jake is a special guest is because I totally had a corrupt file from our last interview. So we are actually doing this for the second time. It was a while ago, probably about a month and a half ago. But for us, it'll be interesting to go over some of these questions. And I have a couple of different follow-up questions. So for us, it'll be almost like a meta experience, Jake. So it'll be kind of cool. But Jake, we'll go with that first question there. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Kind of all over the place. So I have this kind of like philosophy on writing is kind of write what you want when you want. I tend to get earworms when I'm writing and I can't get it out of my mind that like, oh, I got to work on this right now, or I got to work on that right now. And no matter how hard I try to focus on whatever my current project is, if I got something in my mind going, it's like I got to switch over to that. So that's one of the reasons why it took me so long, I guess, to get my first novel sort of going and then published eventually. So I think it was about 6 years I spent writing my first novel. It was right out of college. So I was working as a microbiologist and I just sort of needed something to like some sort of creative outlet, I guess. And it was between Dungeons and Dragons campaigns and I just needed something to fill my time with. So I picked up writing and it kind of took me forever because I was, like I said, kind of switching back and forth between all these different projects and ideas I had. And so, yeah, I mean, after I got to the point where it was ready to like done and ready to be read, there was the classic begging all my friends to read it for a few years. And then eventually I managed to get a couple people interested in kind of being alpha readers for me to sort of help me with content. And then, yeah, everything, once it kind of was ready, it all sort of started to happen really fast. It was a couple months, in the making, and, it went to an editor, got art. And then I just one day was like, yeah, it's ready. Let's hit that button. And that's about it. I mean, I'm pretty fresh here. So.
So one question that I have that I can't believe I didn't ask this last time. As a microbiologist and like your experience, like when you're studying that kind of subject, do you think that's why you have such a cool creature like the one behind you? Like, do you think that has helped your creature making abilities, if you will, to have more unique world building, with the life that's in your world?
Yeah, so I like to say, and I mean, maybe it's not as much as I want to be, but I like to say that I can blend kind of like logic and like creativity together. I studied, it wasn't microbiology I studied in college, it was biomed. So I did quite a bit of biology classes, something like 80 credits or some ridiculous number of that. So yeah, I would say it probably gave me a lot of inspiration, different ideas when studying anatomy. But I like to when I'm feeling really high on myself, I like to say that I'm smart and creative, so I can blend them together. But then, other days, maybe not so much.
I think we're all there some days. Yeah, I was just curious with that one because, like I think as a history teacher, like people ask me all the time and, they're like, does that help you? And I'm like, well, I think it does, particularly with fantasy because I love ancient history, study more of that, and looking at the trends, looking at how things have changed, looking at conflict, I guess, or enduring issues, within history and
Right.
social studies. I think it has helped me at least, to come up with what I think are real and meaningful conflicts that people can relate to. So yeah, I was just curious because when you have such a unique cover there and such a unique, like creature, like monster, so yeah, I just was curious, if that helped. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's science in general, I think is all about logical thinking. So when it comes to like the creation of different living creatures, it ends up being a lot of like oh, that's stupid, throw it out. Oh, that doesn't make sense. Like scrap that idea and start over. So it is a curse too. But yeah, I mean, I think having like a profession or a like an area of expertise, regardless of what it is, can kind of like help you to develop ideas. Like you said, with history, you have a lot of ideas from what you've learned and like ways to incorporate that into your worlds, which I mean, you can do that with a lot of different subjects. If you
Yeah,
have
for
an
sure.
idea of chemistry, you might be able to explain, certain interactions of if you want to show cool explosions or magical interactions or whatever. Um, so yeah,
I like how you said that though, mentioned like the curse of knowledge. Like, 'cause I could definitely see where you will, I've thought of that before because I think I'm more of a literal creature creator where, I will look up things and I like, even like fantastical things. I do like, there to be some sort of semblance, particularly my sci-fi, of real life, if you will. So I do like to think like, would this type of creature be possible in this area?
right,
Which was my one short story, for instance, where like I want to see what happens. Like, I'm curious to see how we would evolve if we were underground for like 2,000 years, let's say.
right.
And the science that people can't like were talking about, I'm like, oh my God, it was so cool.
Mm,
But I think at times, it became a little bit of a burden, which is why I kind of put it away because I'm like, okay, I need to find more of a, this is scientific and a reasoning, but at the same time, I have to come up with some sort of fantastical element, and
right.
kind of find a blend together. So I could definitely see, where I've had that happen, where the curse of knowledge, has kind of hampered my writing ability, if you will. So I think that makes total sense.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to just, make your brain shut up and just be like, yeah, I mean, that's how it is, and like you don't necessarily need to explain it. Like why is the people who live underground for 2,000 years, why is their skin not like super pale or super gray or whatever? You just have to be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you don't know. I mean, you're looking at a fantasy world. You don't know everything.
That's true. Yeah. And well, even the people there might not know, right? Like I just talked with I think it was Lucy McLaren, and we had talked about world building, and she's like, not everybody in my world knows everything about my world. And I said, I think that's one of my pet peeves is when you get somebody who, like it's one thing when someone like Han Solo, right, helps you go to that world and, kind of infiltrates that one world. But, Leia provides a whole different aspect,
Right.
I would say Lando too, and I just think it's interesting when people don't do that, and I think they make the mistake of that one person, knows everything. Not
Yeah.
everybody can be Gandalf or or Lorraine or whoever. So yeah, it gets kind of interesting to think about it. But
Yeah, for sure.
that'd be a really good T-shirt, by the way, of like you. I just picture like Jake, cartoon Jake, telling his brain stop it, or like the brain, and being like, now it's time to write or something.
Maybe that's not a shirt I'd wear in public, but
Yeah, yeah. But every writer just was like, yes, I get that, right?
absolutely. Yep. Over designing, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely over analyzing.
Yep.
So for the second one there, what genre do you currently write in and how did you decide?
So my one true love has always been epic fantasy. I it started really young. I got into like the Elder Scrolls games
Mm.
back when the Xbox 360 had just come out, and Dragon Age. Um, drawing a blank on all the great different fantasy games, but
Oh,
I
wait.
remember I played way more games than I ever should have, and I'll never tell my mom that I always disobeyed her 1 hour rule one way or another. Um, but no, it's kind of been a fascination of mine. It always was, world building, and then obviously movies, you know, Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and Star Wars and all that stuff just got me kind of hooked into this endless cycle of needing new worlds and magic and fantastic elements. Um, Dungeons and Dragons really filled that void for me when I hit high school and kind of ran out of cool stuff to do. So once I started seeing kind of the possibilities of the Dungeons and Dragons, and then I became a game master, obviously, and started running all these campaigns. It was just like the possibilities, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we also at the time too, like, we had so many, like not just even just, D&D setting itself. I mean, you had Forgotten Realms, you had so much source material, you had, fourth edition. I feel like they're Eberron. I mean, I just feel like you had so many. You had Pathfinder, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of home brewing, which I think was a lot different with the internet than it
Yeah.
had been previously. So yeah, like Starfinder, really became big. A lot of different things I think helped fill, help to keep your imagination going on.
Right. Yeah. And then once again, it's just kind of, I started world building, doing homebrew stuff myself. And I started realizing like, oh, I don't need to make every campaign like Elder Scrolls or something, like you can draw, eventually you're coming up with your own stuff, but when you're young, you're basically just ripping off other material. And
Yeah,
even that is fun, like some of my fondest memories are sitting in the basement, when I was 17 years old, drinking Mountain Dew and eating chips with
no,
friends, and like don't even remember what we were playing with.
yeah,
It was just the company.
yeah, yeah. I do remember that. Like my buddies and I loved where they had 4-player for PlayStation 2 Champions of Norath, 1 and 2. And
Yep.
yeah, that's what we would do. The Mountain Dew would come out and everybody knew you were ain't getting any sleep, Friday night.
Yep.
We did it back to back, we wanted to get the campaign done or whatever, checkpoint we were getting done. Yeah, it was going down. So
Yep.
did you ever play the D&D, the Dungeons and Dragons Xbox game that they had for the original Xbox? It was 4-player. It was amazing.
That might have been a little before my time.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so like Xbox, like the original Xbox was really big when I was probably in like fourth or fifth grade.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I had a GameCube, so I was playing a lot of like Smash
Ooh,
Bros. And Mario
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I was
little
always trying to get the other consoles. My parents were like, "Go outside," so I didn't spend as much time as I'd like to of playing video games when I was younger. But
yeah, yeah. If you ever have an opportunity, like if they do it as like a downloadable content or something for Xbox, I recommend it to you or anybody. The world building, the amount of different races, the classes, the skill building system was absolutely amazing. It was like it was a D&D nerds fantasy game. I mean, they made it for the fans. It was
right.
to this day, other than Diablo 2 with the expansion, I would say it had to be my favorite game of all time, like back to back. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. But same thing though, it's like I was always thinking, I always use that campaign in particular in my mind and the places that they went. I think that's why I'm still addicted to the desert settings.
Mm,
That amazing desert setting. Diablo 2 did too, of course, and Act 2 and stuff.
right.
But yeah, yeah. We feel like we were lucky though. There's 2 really good really 3-4 decades, back to back to back. Where if you really look at gaming consoles themselves, right, or PC. I mean, you mentioned with Bethesda, and Morrowind, then Oblivion, Skyrim, with the Elder Scrolls. I mean, just some of the best world building that you could possibly imagine. Some of the coolest quests that I think I've ever
Right.
been on. So yeah, that's really
Yeah,
good.
and I mean, we're kind of even now we're still kind of in like a fantasy boom almost.
It
There's
really
more
is. Yeah.
TV shows and movies coming out than ever. I mean, there's some aspects of video games are maybe a little lacking, but I mean, I'm playing the newest God of War, and it's just like it's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. My friend Steve McHugh just started that. Like I think it was like 2 weeks ago, and he said that was had to be one of the best games he's played within the last like 10 years. So
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
I definitely want to still play like Assassin's Creed, Ragnarok or
Yeah,
whatever, or Valhalla or whatever. Like
well,
the
yeah,
main character, yeah, that main character just to me, just like he gives me so many writing ideas. Like I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I just want to take that character and like put him.
it's interesting you mentioned that. I had a D&D session. I think it was last weekend, and it was part. I was kind of using like that inspiration of like the like Viking for like a baron of a city and whatever. And
Oh,
I had the players do a flighting competition with him, which is like um in the game you do it. It's like rhyming, it's like poetry plus epic rap battles of history. Uh,
I love those. Those are awesome.
so you're basically insulting the other person over a lot of alcohol with but doing it poetically, right? Like writing a poem and then insulting them with it. So it's interesting you bring that up because I just did that.
I'm sorry, Jake, but if you are not recording your sessions and then using things like that in your next book, I'm gonna be so disappointed, man. Like I want to read that now. I want to
Right.
read that now, Jake. Like that sounds amazing. That sounds so funny to me.
Mhm.
God. that is hilarious. That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
it's funny that I mean, that is a good point though, like I think some people they're like, oh, I don't know what to write. And I'm like, I just don't have that problem. I'm like, I'm going to credit you with being the earworm in my earworm
Yep.
because since our last talk, I was like, I don't know. I finished something and then I was like trying to go and fix a couple things. I was trying to do NaNoWriMo, kind of had a crazy November, and especially with the baby coming. And I was like, I couldn't focus on any one thing. And I was like, well, one of the authors I just talked to was like, oh, I go here. I'm like, I'm going to go back to that. Cause I'm like, at least I'll get, a few things done,
Right.
before my son gets here. So I'm going to credit you with having figured out, you saying that helped me get an earworm. And I actually figured out all the remaining problems for my first fantasy novel for its draft 2. So
All
I
right.
was trying to figure out who had said the earworm to me. So it's definitely you. So I'm going to credit you with that. So thank you so
Perfect.
much for letting me feel like it was okay to go from project to project when I was having trouble focusing.
Well, you're most welcome.
Yeah. We'll credit you in A Thief's Ambition. All right. Don't worry. We got a huge list going so far. So it'll be cool.
Excellent.
Well, that's really cool. I'm always jealous now whenever you're talking about your game, your game situation. I'm like, they just sound so cool. So ours is about to take a little hiatus because my son's here. I'm like, oh. So I think we're gonna play Warhammer online. My
Oh,
friend
yeah.
is gonna run it on Roll20, and I've never played the fantasy version. I've only played like the sci-fi one or the other one. So yeah, it's be interesting. But
Yeah, that is interesting. I've never done that either.
I gotta say, I was thinking to you, I thought this when we were going through, I was like, okay, I'll try it. But like as you're setting up, and I recommend this to our audience too, like, old school fantasy Warhammer. Yeah, like just there's obviously there's so many omnibuses and stuff, there's so many characters and places they've gone now. But yeah, we were going over it. It's a lot different than the other systems, D&D, Pathfinder and stuff. But yeah, it was super, super cool. And I'm like, we got to play this game now. My friend's moving, so I'm hoping that we just end up doing it online. But definitely something that I think a lot of people be interested in. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
really cool. We're gonna try and record a couple of our sessions just to kind of put on the channel just so people can see.
Well,
But
there
yeah,
you go. I mean, you could
highly
always just
recommend it.
stream it,
Yeah, yeah,
Twitch
yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It was pretty cool just setting it up. So I'm pretty excited to play it. But
Yeah.
so I'm even more interested than I was before because I did actually just get your Journey into the Cosmos downloaded to my Kindle. I got to finish like 2 books and then I'm all set to review it. So what is your book Journey into the Cosmos about and how did you come up with this idea?
So this was actually a campaign I ran just when I was starting college. It was kind of a mishmash of like different friends and random people. Some of them hadn't really even met before. And I remember I was working a warehouse job at the time, and I was sitting in the warehouse all alone the day before the session. And I kind of thought I had what I was going to do for the day. When I got home, we were doing, I kind of expected to be like a pickup session, where you play that day and then it's over and you don't do it again. But I kind of came up with this idea, like, wouldn't that be cool to like, there's no like overarching theme. You're just like explorers, right? You come to this new land, new world, new whatever, and your only job is basically to walk around and see shit. And so that's kind of where the idea started. And I was like, well, where could I go with that? I mean, we're talking about a fantasy world with magic and all sorts of stuff. And, originally it was like, well, it's a new continent, like people sailed across the ocean. And then I was thinking like, we could even go more fantastic than that. It could be extraplanar, right? And then I was like, but people have explored the planes. I mean, all my players have seen the planes. We've been playing for a long time at that time. So I decided to go somewhere I hadn't before, which was obviously has been done, but just not in my campaigns, which was go to the multiverse and kind of take this idea of there are other realms out there that, people don't know of. And so my players kind of, they were sent on this journey. They were supposed to be explorers, working for this crazy, kooky old wizard. And he was basically just commissioning them to go there and take notes. And what I kind of came up with was, this is an assortment of planes, somewhat like your own, where there's like a material plane where all the normal races live. And then there's these other wacky planes, and they're not like what you expect. In D&D you have the fire plane, the water plane, you have Celestia, you have the Hells. So I kind of came up with a whole different planar arrangement. All really rough stuff in my head, I guess, just sort of like, oh, there could be a plane like this, there could be a plane like that, kind of just like random stuff. And then when the campaign started, it kind of just took off so well, and I had a lot of good role players in it, and a lot of people came into the game with really cool character ideas, and they just role played the hell out of it. And when we were done with our first session, we were so excited to play again. We played again. I think the next day, people drove down again, and we kept going. And that campaign lasted about 3 years, I think, until we eventually it kind of faded out with everyone having different plans and different things going on. But the idea always stuck with me, and so that's where the book comes in, right? So a D&D campaign isn't a great way to have a book, right? Because you have these 4 characters, no one's a main character, everyone has to have their own stories. So I focused in on what I thought was the most, more compelling story, which was there's this young, naive mage who's really book smart on the run, and he comes down to this place basically desperately seeking kind of like fame, fortune, and honestly a way to get, the people hunting him off his back. And then that's where he was exposed to this idea by this crazy wizard. I always love to keep those in, nice tropes. And the wizard sent him off to this random universe, basically, where they plane traveled around, and the friends they make along the way are great. Everything's fun and kind of very dangerous, very alien. And then sort of when it comes time to come back, that's where they start to have these like, oh, this organization that's hunting the main character, Raz, is actually already established. They have like a base out on this other world, this other universe, which is really bizarre to them. So that's kind of where the main storyline starts to kind of develop. And then they have this like aha realization, like there's something sinister going on here. And yeah, so I guess that's the very long pitch.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple things came to mind. So when you were explaining this, so I'm just curious with these new worlds, do you have like, do things change? Like, do the physics change? Do the magic change? Does anybody's powers change? Because I know for me, at least, like for my fantasy setting, like a lot of the powers that the druids get come from the planet itself,
Right.
and the magic from the planet. So I'm always thinking like, it almost is for me, if they went somewhere else, it's probably something I should think about now that you mentioned it. Now you got me thinking like maybe it's like a like a Krypton sort of thing. Like I don't know if they would be able to do that stuff somewhere else. So I was just curious, like if your characters, if those kind of things were the same, or if they had to deal with those types of problems.
Yeah, so I a couple of the planes they visit, they end up having some problems with different gravity, right? So gravity working in odd ways, being stronger or weaker, not sucking them to the floor, things like that. But otherwise, it's interesting you mentioned a druid. So a druid is a supporting character in this cast, and he finds himself having difficulty kind of sensing where his power comes from when he wanders about some of these planes, particularly the ones that have been, are kind of lifeless voids. They come to a few planes that are like something they've never seen before, right? Like they can't even imagine something living here, and the druid's like throwing up because he's so out of connection with basically what he always was in connection with. I'm trying to think of other things. So I developed like a magic system for the secondary sort of universe that the characters explore.
Cool.
And you get kind of like a tidbit of it, sort of basically talking about like the magic system works, where it depends on like the time of day you were born. So if you were born at night, you have these kinds of powers if you're a mage, and if you're born during the day, you have these kinds of powers. And then there are some other differentiators like that, like, oh, if you're born at twilight, but other than that, I mean, I'm trying to think. I think there's about 4 chapters where they spend kind of exploring the multiverse. So there's a little bit of that, but a lot of it's focused on like, oh shit, we're dying, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I just think like that would be just such a good. That's a really unique situation, which is really cool, I think, on your part to give us the reader the ability to see, because you get your typical druid, right? But then you're really putting them in a situation that, like, I don't think they're going to see, or the reader at least isn't going to see very often,
Right.
uh, which to me is really cool. And that really gets me and which is why I love to read personally fantasy, because I love to write fantasy. And to me, that really gives me a lot of ideas for character conflicts or character situation. And I always think of like Robert Downey Jr. What was it like? Iron Man 3 or whatever, when he didn't have the suit around for most of the time and he had to like
Yeah.
figure it out. Like, I don't know, like everybody always talks about that movie. I actually really liked it. I thought it gave us, a new, wasn't your typical superhero movie, but we still got the superhero part. And I don't know, I felt it was compelling because we got to know Tony more as a person and a character,
Yeah.
and got to see him kind of clean up his crap, that he
Yeah.
just threw around for decades before this. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know, that druid, it seems like really cool, and I'd be wondering and want to keep reading to figure out, and follow along with those characters, figure out, how they solve that problem. So
Right. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Iron Man 3. So I think it was a bad movie. But I always remember the scene where like Tony Stark goes to like the Ace Hardware and picks up a bunch of stuff and then builds all these cool little gadgets and sneaks into the place with like uh like ornaments filled with like shrapnel and stuff. Like I think that scene is actually really, really good, really
yeah.
cool for character development. But other than that, like, man, I could talk for an hour about that movie. Like, he just blows up all of his suits. Like, come on, we know
Yeah.
he's gonna need those.
Well, one of these days we're gonna have to just do the. I think, because I think it's so funny because, I just was talking to one of my friends about this, and she's like, well, she has a very decisive, I guess, like outcome for a character in her book, and
Mhm.
it's 50-50, and it comes like 3/4 of the way, right around the climax, and people either love the book and finish it or hate it and stop what she did with that character. That's pretty much where she's at. And her and I got to talking. I'm like, I would love to find, like, I'm gonna have to write that down. Iron Man 3. Maybe we have to debate why you think it wasn't good and why I think it was very good. Because I just want to point out to people that, you know, like Sadir, for instance, Samir. I was starting up with his book, The Crew, and it just came out. So somebody gave it a 1 star, and I'm like reading through, and I'm like, this is hilarious. I'm like, this is like my kind of book.
Right.
And I talked with a lot of authors recently, about that. It's like, that difference between readers. Like somebody
Right.
might read your book and really enjoy it. Somebody might not, and I think it's don't get hung up on that kind of thing. So I think, Iron Man 3 is a really good example, like, you don't like it, I really like it, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I think it goes to show, right, that, it's probably going to be the same with some of our work, but it doesn't
Mhm.
matter, I should keep going for, those audiences that do really enjoy your work. But yeah, I
For
don't know,
sure.
just
I
it
mean, you
sounds
could be
really
wrong
cool.
about Iron Man. That's cool.
Yeah, that's fair. I probably am. I probably am. Probably am. There was something else that came out recently, and I was like, God, I hated this. And everybody's like, I loved it. I'm like, I couldn't even finish. Yeah. And then my friend goes, well, I can't remember that one we were talking about, but when we were talking the other day, he goes, well, Eternals was bad. We both agreed, like, we did not like
Yeah.
Eternals. So
Everyone can agree on Eternals. That's for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. He's in your camp. He does not like Iron Man 3, like, at all.
Mm.
And we always tease each other about not having taste. But yeah, what was the other one I had? Oh, so you said you have a little bit different. So your magic system, you said, was when they go out into the multiverse, which is a little bit different. Then where is that, where we have like the light or dark-born magic?
Yeah. So that's basically like when they're exploring this other universe, they come across people who use magic in a different way. And the main character's like, oh, I'm really confused, like asks questions about it basically. And it's I tried to include it just to make sure that it kind of felt a little flushed out. Like their magic doesn't change, like I'm not like things don't get wonky in that way. Though that's not a bad idea. That'd be an interesting idea. But no, yeah. So they like the magic system remains steady for the characters who go out into this random universe thing.
I'm just thinking as a social studies teacher, because I had another social studies teacher who's an author who I interviewed about a month ago, shortly after our first one, and he made a good point. He's like, well, cultural diffusion, like what would happen if your mage went out into the multiverse and saw this different magic system, asked questions, learned about it? What would he be able to come back and then do or change about the way he does magic? So I was just curious because I think that that's a really interesting writing question, that I kind of want to explore now, and I think it's an interesting way for different people to see different people's magic system or,
Right.
and yeah, I don't know. I kind of find it's almost like a Steven Erickson type of solution, because he's got all these different magic. He basically has a lot of different magic systems going on at once. So I just think that, and he always brings up really interesting points with how people use the different magic systems. So
Right.
I think
that could even be a whole book in and of itself, like a mage trying
really
to learn
good,
the other magic system, and then
yeah,
comes back and can use both types. I guess that'd be weird.
yeah. It almost reminds me of like Will White's Cradle, where in the main character's little realm, and then other things happen, and he gets different ideas. And I'm like about halfway through the series, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody. But it brings up interesting character concepts, I think, and character development. So yeah, so that's a really cool idea there. Let's see. So for that fourth one, so how did you go about your world building, and what would you change in the future? I'm curious as a DM what you decided to keep and what you decided to throw away, and maybe what you decided you had to improve upon for the book, because like you said, it was a lot different. So
Yeah, I mean, so when I started, it was the whole project was just for me. It was always like when I started, it was always like I might share this with the people who are in the campaign. It's just something that I want to be able to look at and read because, I'd been kind of quasi writing for years and always thought it was fun to kind of come back over the stuff I had written and just read it and be like, yeah, that was terrible, but it's also kind of like cool remembering the thoughts in the brain mind. But it's man, I lost my train of thought there. Okay, returning to the world. So yeah, so basically it started as like I'm going to use everything that basically D&D taught me, and I'm going to put this stuff down as it happened in the campaign. And well, that turned out to be probably about 600 pages.
wow.
Just
Whoa.
absolute nonsensical ramblings of all the different random things that happen. Because, a campaign lasts years, and
yeah.
Every session could be a whole chapter. And so at some point I was like, okay, I really like this. Like, this is fun. So I started cutting and at some point I had to kind of start deciding like, all right, I think I might actually just publish this. It would be kind of fun. And then that's when I started paring down, oh, he casts magic missile, and had to start kind of coming up with my own ideas. So there were some things that definitely remained, like kind of the core structure of the magic system is fairly straightforward. If you have seen a lot of fantasy or played Dungeons and Dragons, you kind of understand you have the trichotomy of like there's natural magic, there's holy magic, and then there's arcane magic. But then, I tried to create some distinctions within those as well to sort of flesh it out a little bit more. So for example, my main character he doesn't use a spell book, right? So that would be classically defined as a sorcerer. I kind of took it towards more of like the wild magic sort of route where, this magic comes to him and he doesn't always know what's going to happen when he begins to cast a spell. But like, he knows that it's dangerous basically. And so that creates a lot of conflict for him. But then, there's the nature magic, and I tried to create it a lot more. It's a lot more intuitive and a lot less like, oh, in the morning I wake up and I prepare these 7 spells, and then I can cast these 7 spells and power them up and whatever. And it's a lot more like he feels what he needs to do, and then he just sort of like moves his hands and says some weird words, and like magic happens, and he doesn't like, he's more of a conduit for the magic coming out of him, and he can't really explain why or how it's happening. So I kind of tried to really take like a bit of a spin on sort of like already understood concepts. And while we're jumping around all over the place here, that's maybe something that in future projects I might like to work on a little bit, is find a way to create a really unique, interesting, compelling magic system that's like all my own, right? Because I made the conscious decision to kind of keep the magic system a little more understandable, basic, I guess, to some degrees, because I knew this was my first novel, and then subsequent series. I really wanted it to be, I wanted to be able to focus on the characters, the plot, the world building, and then not have to worry too much about the complexities of this magic system.
Yeah.
And then what could I do better? What could I improve? I think I covered it all, right?
Yeah. Really well. Yeah. Well, first of all, follow up. I have to say the way that you explain nature magic there should be really used to explain it further for most people, because I feel like you did a really good job, which makes more sense to
Right.
me, which I believe is more of the 5e or what they're trying to go with the new playtest
Right.
in doing, particularly with Druid, because we were just talking about this the other day, my buddy and I, Saturday, and we were discussing, like how the Ranger and Druid feel so close together. And really, I always, in my own fantasy world and game setting, I always change those things a bit to make the Ranger more of a roguish scout, who can do
Yeah.
some interesting Ranger things rather
Right.
than just a druid with a bow. And so I think you really explained it really well. I think the wild magic to me seems really cool, and I like how you said that like the druid just kind of is a conduit and just kind of knows what's going on. To me, which makes more sense from a
Right.
from that class or standpoint, and it makes, I think it makes the druid for yourself and your book more unique.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. It'd be really cool, I think, just saying. I think you just set yourself up so well with world building where, you could literally, like, I'm thinking, like, what if they went to one realm, tick somebody off, and then they had to go back to it later? I mean, you're just like you just could very easily set up so much conflict for the same group of characters or somebody else later that they have to deal with. I just
Yeah.
think you set yourself up so great for whatever you want to do. If you did want to
Right.
continue in this universe, you could literally start anywhere.
Right.
And I think that that's genius. Then you would have characters, like this Will Mage, for instance, or the Druid, even whoever, whoever survives. I think that you could set them up for, those older characters later on, or
Right.
I think you set yourself up really well for a great multifaceted fantasy, world, essentially, or multiverse, if you will. It's more of a
Right.
multiverse. You
Yeah.
are the next Marvel, Jake. Like, that's basically what you did. You got your own MCU here, which is pretty cool. We'll call it
Oofta.
JCU.
The
Working
Jake
title.
Cinematic Universe.
I like that.
Yep.
I like that a lot. Man, I'm getting a lot of t-shirts made today, let me tell you.
All right, there you go. I'll make sure to send you one once I get them, get all the merch done.
Oh yeah, I cannot wait. I cannot wait, because that's what we're talking about doing. Because we have this one thing, and if it works at the 3 Comic Cons we're going to in the late spring, early summer, then next fall for season 3, we'll be able to have paid for all the podcast t-shirts to send all of our alum like yourself. So
Sick.
we're really hoping that, yeah, we're really hoping that we can do that. That's like one of our really, really, really big goals, after everything else. So we would love to do like a Patreon and stuff starting next fall to be able to do that sort of thing. So every time, you come on or whatever, we'll throw some swag at you.
Oh yeah.
nice coffee mug with, our logo or something. But yeah, that's really cool.
Sweet.
All right. Well, I love your world building personally. I'm really, really excited. I have, your book downloaded. I have it in my queue, ready to go. I've been so slow reading since I saw you last. It's been ridiculous, but
Yep.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I figure once the baby's here, I get all this other junk done. I figure he's got to sleep at some point. I got
Right.
my Kindle and I'm more used to it now. So hopefully I'll be flipping through them back. But
I'm sure you'll get some sweet parental leave too.
yeah, we're doing like 3 weeks because then we have like we got the break before and then we get a break for February break after. So yeah, it's not too bad. We're not going anywhere this year, like for different breaks. We're just staying here. So instead of traveling, and then getting all tired and stuff, it's just gonna be like me, the baby, and the Kindle. And I'm gonna try to read out loud. So, we get him hooked on fantasy right away. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, he'll grow up being like, am I a will mage? Like, am I part of the universe? Like, am I part of the JCU? Yeah. it'd be
Stop
really-
talking about the JCU. It's never gonna happen, okay?
But I'm just saying, people have said that before about their stuff. And then, 10 years later, I don't think George R. R. Martin, when he was either of our ages, right, like really thought like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. I think a lot of people forget how old he actually was once, Game of Thrones, his book came out and started doing well, let alone the TV show. So I still have hope for both of us. So
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. There's definitely still time to be to make it big,
exactly. Yeah.
Keep telling yourself that, Mr. Cool.
I tell myself that all the time. My kids always ask me, they're like, what happens if you don't make it big? I said, I'll just write another book. And they're like, but why would you keep writing books if nobody likes it? I said, no. I said, there's gonna be one person that likes each book. I was like, I'll just write another one. And they're like amazed that that's just like my thing. I'm like, yeah, I was like, once I'm done with my black belt in karate, I'm gonna go back to judo and jujitsu and get my black belts there. Like, what are you gonna do once you're there? I was like, I'll probably get one in Hapkido or something. I don't know, or Jeet Kune Do, get a black sash. I'm like, just keep going, They're like, oh, that's so interesting. You just keep writing books even if nobody likes them. I'm like, well, you got to get one eventually that people like. So.
I like them.
There you go. Yeah, I'm like, I enjoy writing them, so I really don't care. So
that's what I always say to people when they tell me I'm not funny, and it's like, I'm not in this world to entertain you, all right? I'm just laughing, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I need to make me laugh, not you.
Yeah, you're the only one you have to entertain. So I feel like that's totally fair. 100%. There's another t-shirt today. So for number 5, what is a will mage and how did you come up with your magic system?
All right, so we kind of talked about the magic system a little bit. There's the skeleton of Dungeons and Dragons with a little bit of, like adding in, taking out where I saw fit. Will magic is essentially the more emotive form of spell casting in my world. So there is you can go to a school and learn how to inscribe magical runes into books and then recite those runes to create magic. And that's more of sort of like your Doctor Strange-esque sort of way to do magic. And then there's the will mage, and the will mage is basically doesn't really know the source of the magic. It just kind of happens. And they're the lucky ones that don't need to go to school to learn how to do it. But as I described earlier, it can be a little bit more dangerous for themselves and those around them, which actually is kind of the beginning of like the major conflict in the book, is that the main character, he's on the run because he actually killed somebody with his magic. He was trying to do something and it just all blew up in his face, and he murdered a little boy, and he was basically like, has to reevaluate his life essentially. So that's nice. You don't have to learn how to do it, but it's also a lot more dangerous because it can just, if you're really emotional or if you're trying to do something that you're not ready to do, it can just kill you or something,
Wow. So you would say then for the wild magic, like for the will mage, with it being a wild magic system, that you really don't have control over the power level, so to speak. Like you might be trying to cast a level 1, light a candle, but you could cast a level 5 fireball on accident.
Yeah, so sometimes I try not to do that too much. I didn't want, I wanted it to feel like the challenges that they were fighting were kind of like equal to what they were able to deal with. But yeah, there are definitely some moments where, he tries to do one thing and something else happens, and it's sometimes way better and sometimes way worse than what he was anticipating. one of my favorite examples of this is at some point he tries to like shield himself from damage, but instead he creates a steak dinner, and it just like clatters to the ground, and he's like, well, that sucked, but yeah, I kind of tried to make it so that, most of the time, if you can kind of keep control of it, but during particularly stressful times, near death experiences, random things can happen from time to time, and that can be quite dangerous, but also adds a level of like kind of wow, I guess, to the magic, because it's not always exactly what the reader's expecting. Like, the main character is a very analytical character, and he's like, I'm gonna, like, you basically see it through, it's a first person novel, so it's from his eyes, and so I try to do this, and then while I do this, I feel the magic surge in this way, and it kind of this happens, and so you're not exactly always knowing what's going to happen, I guess, when he tries to reach out for magic.
That's smart. That's a good page turner there. Like you have to like keep going to see how he helps get himself and everybody else out of trouble. I feel like, yeah, that expectation of something interesting happening, I think would be really cool. It
Right.
would keep me enthralled and wanting to be like, okay, well, how's he gonna get out of this one? Like,
Right.
it's gonna be he wants a steak dinner now because he's hungry. He's just gonna make himself like stone skin and not be able to eat anything for the next 24 hours. Like, that'd be like an interesting. There are a lot of interesting questions would pop up into my mind, and that to me that sounds way more effective for putting an awe to the magic,
Right.
in the magic system, because I always think of Brandon Sanderson's explanation for the hard versus soft magic, where really like Gandalf's in between, like he's more of a soft magic or whatever he uses, but yet we know that the ring is a hard magic system. We know what it does, and
Right.
I always liked his explanation for Gandalf and that magic system is, it adds wonder and awe to the world. So I think you channeled that really well with just that
Right.
one little detail. So
Well, that's one of the things too. I think a lot of like authors and storytellers in general have kind of discovered is that, it's about trying to channel this. Like, it's not about like, oh, did you pick a hard or a soft magic system? It's like, you have to find a way to basically be like, there are rules. These are how these rules work. And here's the wonder and awe that magic can create. Because if you're using magic and it doesn't create awe, then it doesn't, like, why do you even have magic?
yeah, you might as well be like historical fiction or something in a different place. Yeah.
Right. Or just even a fantasy world that doesn't really have magic,
Yeah,
like Game of
exactly.
Thrones, for example. Like, if your character's just going to be like, oh, I create a little ball of fire and throw it at someone, like, they might as well just have a sword or a bow or whatever, so
Yeah.
you kind of have to balance it, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Yeah. I think at times like it might, yeah, yeah, it's a good point. I always think of that because I'm like, I do like Brandon Sanderson's, like the hard systems and stuff. But at the same time, I do go into like I'm gonna reference like H.M. Long's Hall of Smoke, for instance, like which it's a pretty hard magic system, but then she like ends up inserting a lot of really interesting, awe-inspiring moments where they help character development and you're not entirely sure how the magic system
Right.
works for some of the higher beings. And
Right.
then one of her main character goes about this journey and you're like, oh, there's no way that X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And it just made it so interesting. And because you didn't know how the magic was going to work, you didn't know if this person was going to die or if they were going to survive or whatever. I mean, it really, really like had me enthralled with, and I'm like, I had to figure out how it worked. Like it was
Yeah.
it was a mystery to solve, and yeah, it was done really well. So
And
yeah.
that sort of direction can kind of go either way. I mean, like, when I see that, sometimes if it's done wrong, I can look at it and be like, oh, great. Like, so he's going to wave his hand and like this thing is going to save him because like plot armor, but, if you can manage to create an awe-inspiring soft magic system that doesn't feel like it's just always going to deliver the characters from whatever peril, then that can be really, really effective, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like how you said plot armor there because I feel like I like you. I've seen I'm just gonna take like her book for instance. At first, like when a couple things are gonna happen early on, I'm like, oh no, like, but yeah, she did it really well, and I was like, oh, okay, and yeah,
Mm,
it was a good exercise in how to have that balance, but still have consequences.
right.
But I've definitely read a couple books over the last couple years where I'm just like, okay, I might as well just be done. I'm like,
Right.
I know everybody's gonna make it through.
Mm,
Not really gonna be any trauma there. I'm like, I just think that with trauma, there's growth, no matter really, what the effects are. And I give Will White credit for constantly being traumatic to his main characters, but also, giving them real triumphs. But I never know who's going to die or who's going to be okay, or if they
right.
are okay, what sort of scars, physical or otherwise, they're going to take with them. I mean, and that whole journey process with being with the characters, I think really adds, that sense of danger really adds. And I think that's what a lot of people, really like Game of Thrones, right? Like you didn't know who was going to make it in the
Right.
book, or you didn't know who's going to make it per week. And and I always think Steven Erickson's a lot like that. He's killed 7 out of my 10 favorite characters.
Mm,
We're only halfway done with the second to last book, so I'm just like,
that's just unlucky.
yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it ends up being interesting. But yeah, that was a great answer. Um, so you talked a little bit about how your experience as a game master has helped you in your storytelling. I'm wondering one way maybe that being a game master has hindered or hurt you, you think, or maybe slowed you down, I guess is a better word, in terms of maybe writing this first book.
Yeah, just one.
Give me
The big
7.
one,
Okay.
the big one that comes to mind is kind of content overload, right? So,
That's a good one.
I mean, if campaigns last, we've only recently started tracking our sessions, and like we've been playing a campaign for not quite a year now. I think we're on session like 15 or 16, and these are 8 to 10 hour sessions.
Yeah, that's a
So
lot. Yeah.
there's a lot of content, and we're not done yet, right? I mean, so making one campaign into one book ended up being just absolutely. I was trying to stick to the source material, right? Because the source material is where all my joy came from. But at some point, I had to basically step away from this like almost like episodic structure where it was like, oh, this session we did this, and then this session we did that, and a lot of it didn't matter to the overall narrative. So at some point I had to learn like, well, you got to cut some of this stuff. You got to trim it down. You got to focus it in on one story, like obviously you want to have, multiple arcs, character arcs, story arcs kind of like coming to fruition at different times. But I kind of had to focus it in. I guess that was the biggest problem for me.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that makes total sense. I feel like that would, as somebody that started playing games, but not being a DM, but like playing games on the other side of the table. And that's why I enjoyed, writing, because I wanted to keep the story going. It was very difficult to, particularly with world building, to know like where to go, what to show, I feel like I did the same thing. I was way too worried about overloading. And then when I realized later on, I was like, oh, I really don't need to really, like, it might be good to know these things as writing exercise or get warmed up, but
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff isn't really relevant to the story,
Yeah.
or even the world at times, but it's not relevant to the characters that are going through. Like, who really needs to hear that right now? Yeah, I think I did a lot of exposition rather than actual
Mhm.
actual writing.
The info dumps were a big one.
Yeah.
Obviously, I watched a good number of Brandon Sanderson's like lectures and online things. One thing that kind of stuck with me is like when you're trying to build a scene, make it awesome, right? Like it was a really basic thing to say, but like, why would you hold back? I guess is kind of like my instinct is to be like, make it realistic, make it what the world would be like. And then once in a while, I hear Brandon Sanderson's voice in my head being like, make it awesome. And then it's like, okay, how do I make this more awesome than what it is right now? Because right now it's just an info dump and it's boring and people are talking. And but yeah, I guess that's one of the things about D&D is like, you try to make every session important. You try to make every session exciting in its own way. But when you write it down in a book, it doesn't sound as exciting because it's not developing the plot. It's not developing your characters as well as it probably should. So that's when you need to cut or alter.
As you said that, I could literally hear him because I've listened to those lectures way too many times. I could literally hear him in his exact voice how he says the word awesome there. I
Yep.
don't know which one. Oh, that's really funny. But I agree with you. He's right. I was going through and I just told my buddy over the weekend, like I said, I've been working on draft 2, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, two of my main characters are set. I'm like, every scene is awesome. I'm like, even if it's not pure action or whatever, I'm like, I got a nice blend, I'm like, they have some of the most exciting scenes I've ever written. So I'm like, they're good. It's the other characters that, I am really worried about now, and I'm really working on, because I'm like, okay, and I have to add more of a heist into my heist novel, adding in a crew now, rather than just the two main characters. And yeah, it just, I same thing. I was like, is anybody going to want to read these other chapters?
Right.
I'm like, or are they just going to skip the ones that say Satana, or are they just going to go to Ajax and Mace, and that's why I always worry, so I definitely agree with you. Yeah, and I think Brandon Sanderson's totally right. It's got to be awesome.
Ajax, like the soap.
Oh yes, yeah. Yep.
I just remember that scene from Deadpool.
That's awesome. I didn't even connect that, actually. I was just watching that the other day. That's really funny. Maybe that's where I got it. I think one day I was just like, I need an interesting name to go with Mace, and I was like, I did like MASE, and I'm doing like kind of like at first I was going to do one of my desert settings. I was like, I've been doing like 5 books in my desert setting, and I was like, and then my campaign is there now too, so I end up coming up, and I was like, something didn't feel right, and I was like, okay, I think it's just because I like the, as a game master myself, I like the desert settings. Again, I think it's too much Diablo too. But yeah, I was like, this is not a desert setting book. And I was talking to my buddy about it. He goes, I don't think this book is set in the right part of your world. So we ended up like moving the entire setting, but actually like really ended up helping. So yeah, some of the names made a little bit more sense and stuff with vernacular. But yeah, I think sometimes my buddy's like, yeah, being a game master or being experienced with a lot of different games, he's like, it is really helpful at times for ideas. He's like, but sometimes, there could be too much. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It's both a strength and a burden at the same time, if you will. So yeah, very interesting. So what is one writing tool or strategy that you are thinking about maybe using in the future, or maybe like a POV? I don't know. What's something new that you want to try in the future? Writing tool, strategy? And why?
I remembered this question from our first interview, and I thought, I got to say something really smart this time. But I really, I think what I talked about last time was, magic systems can really make or break a story.
Yeah.
I wish I'd put more effort, more thought into like the cost of magic, right? So I have this idea for like a magic system where magic doesn't exist anymore. There, like, you don't channel magic from yourself. Instead, there are like vestiges of the past that magic is stored in, and you can use those. However, like channeling it through your body is incredibly harmful. Almost sort of like Lovecraft does, where you might drive yourself mad by trying to use the spells or whatever it is. But I kind of like the idea of like, there were these gods, and these gods were killed by mortals, and now we're living the aftermath, and people don't have the ability to use magic anymore, right? And so then they basically come across these magical artifacts, and they have to try to find ways to use them without hurting themselves or dying or whatever. So I guess I would just say like experimenting with interesting magic systems, I think could be really beneficial. That's the only thing I could think of, honestly, to that question.
First of all, sounds awesome. And really good answer. I asked that because sometimes people are saying what's on their minds, in terms of writing, like or magic systems. Some people, it's been a very interesting answer there. And since I asked you last, I've gotten even more of an eclectic group of answers. And
sure,
it always really makes me think. But that one always makes me think, because my magic system personally, like I'm trying to make sure, I do certain things with it. And, people always tell me, well, the magic's cool, but, and there are things they like about the system, but I always worry about that. I always worry about not my magic system not being as appealing. But what you just said sounds awesome. So I really hope that that appears somewhere in your writing, because I would buy that book. I would read that book. That sounds really, really cool. And I feel like you could do so many different things there. Like, heck, you could have like an entire group of mad mages, if you will, who went
Hmm.
mad because of it, but still are able to function. And,
Right.
that'd be really cool, and yeah, it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, you may have to stay tuned for a few years, but yeah, my
Uh,
my current plan is to write, a 6-book series. I've got a lot of them outlined and such. So this, for now, we're sticking with what I'm currently doing, but I've got way too many other ideas. Hopefully I can develop those ideas while I'm working on this one. So
Well, that's really cool. Well, I like the ideas, Jake. Keep them coming, and we'll keep buying the books. We'll keep spreading the word. I mean, that's what we do. And yeah, I'm really excited to read this book, but I'm also really excited to especially see where you go later.
yep.
And there's just so many things that we talked about today and last time where really got me excited. Like I said before, you popped up right on my Facebook feed, and I was like, "Whose book is this?" I'm like, "Why have I not seen this book or this person before?" Like, on my Twitter or whatever. And I was like,
Yep.
I was blaming like the old Twitter company, whoever it was, and I was like, they need to change the algorithm back, because I was like, this is what happens when you kill the writing community on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm like, I miss authors with great books, and
Hmm.
yeah, but I'm glad that Facebook has stepped it up with the sponsored ads and the like
Yep.
pages popping up now.
How awkward was it when you realized that the reason you hadn't heard of me is because I was a nobody?
But I'm telling you, Jake, I'm trying to tell you guys, like, I am constantly like, the only reason I go on a social media, like I do 15-minute runs so I don't get too crazy lately.
Yep, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because I've been getting burnt out. So the more burnout I get, the longer I've been on social media, and I'm like, okay, I got to either read or go write, one of the two.
Yep.
Um, otherwise, then I just feel more burnout the next day. But I've been doing what my friend said. I'm so glad that I did this, because this might help people in the audience, particularly readers. And you popped up because of this, I guarantee. And he told me what you should do is, every single time that you're seeing an author or something that you like with fantasy or sci-fi involving an author or a book or a sponsored ad, like it, even if you don't like it. And he
Right.
goes, you'll get so many more people. And you were probably part of like 10 different authors I got within the same day, that I was like, oh my gosh, like this looks amazing. And it was like right when my algorithm switched. But
Yep.
yeah, but I would just want to point out too, to author, crowd here, it I try constantly to get people on all the platforms. I mean, I am liking, I am searching, like I am looking under rocks. I am, I'm about to start
Yep.
pounding door to door, to find more fantasy, sci-fi, horror authors. I mean, if I don't know somebody, I'm like, please refer me. And I tell people all the time, and I've gotten a lot more emails recently and messages like, hey, I really like Jake's book, or I really liked him on this interview. Please talk to him, or, look at his book. So I just want to point out to people that the best way still is referrals, and just sending me messages, because it's so hard to bust through the algorithms. And if I'm having trouble with my podcast or finding you guys as I'm looking everywhere, I think personally it just really shows how hard it is as an author, to break through that initial wave for social media. So
Yeah,
they
for
don't
sure.
make it easy, that's for sure. So usually they tag us as spam. So what it is. But yeah, well, that's really cool. I just have to say though, your cover's still one of my favorites that I've seen. I mean, I still really like the color. I really like the creature. I love the scene. It
Yep.
really reminds me of, like classic sci-fi with a twist, I would say, or sorry, fantasy with a twist.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I really like it. It really makes me think like, what else is in Jake's head? So it
Yep.
immediately makes me, want to, get in that book and really get in there. And I'm really excited, like I said, to start reading that one. And I'm really excited to, see what else you're going to create. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I mean, when I saw my book cover, when I
cool.
commissioned an artist for it, and
Tell us.
when it came back to me, I was like, oh, Like that is not what I had in mind, but that is awesome.
Yeah. I showed it to a couple of buddies of mine. They're like, "What's that guy's name?" I was like, "Jake Fredendall." I was like, "It's spelled like this," and I was like, Journey to the Cosmos. They're like, "Okay," so got a couple for you there. So
Hey, there
yeah,
we go.
yeah, we'll keep it going. All right, Jake. Well, we'll go with that last one there. Do you have any news, updates, promos, current projects, anything like that that you're currently working on that you can share with us?
So I mentioned that I'm doing, a 6-book series.
I'm
I I'm gonna do them. It doesn't matter like how long it takes me or how much money I make. I'm not here to make money. I'm just doing this for fun. It's for myself. Um, so book 2, I'm really hammering into it where I'm talking to basically like my alpha and beta readers and um, stuff is getting pretty close. I'm aiming for an early next year release. I'm
Oh,
hoping
cool.
February or March.
Oh,
Um, it,
wow.
it'd be nice to have it out by the time this video comes out, but I doubt that.
Yeah.
So I guess stay tuned for that information. I mean, you know, basically I'm because of how scatterbrained I am, it kind of works like once I normally get finished with the following book before I'm done editing my previous book, if that makes sense. So
Totally.
book
Yeah.
2 was done before I finished editing book 1, and that's the same thing. So book 3 is actually typed. Book 4 is started. Book 2 is in all the stages of we're currently, like I said, alpha beta reading, and then we're doing after that it'll be editing, and the edits will go pretty quick, I think, hopefully, fingers crossed. But yeah, so my hope is to pump out um, that content and kind of get it going. I've been talking to I got a new artist for this next book, and I'm
Oh,
pretty excited about that. So I guess stay tuned. I suppose. I don't know.
yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's a lot right there. So that's amazing. Yeah. I've
I've never
definitely
had
got like
problems getting words on page. It's a lot of people get the writer's block. I think my problem ends up being more of like I get too many words on the page.
yeah, the writer's flood. Yep.
Yeah. It's the
Yeah,
other side of that coin. But
Yep.
the
Yep.
positive is if I can just switch projects and keep typing. So
Yeah. Yep. I find when I don't do that, and yeah, I find when I don't do that, I don't get anything done. Yeah,
yep.
I find if I just keep working, it might take me a couple days or weeks, but I'll just go back to the thing and, whatever I was working. I feel like it gives me more synergy that way. I feel
Yep.
like otherwise I just feel lazy and like recently I was sick and stuff and I stopped working. I had some personal things go on, like family health crises and stuff. So I just I've been thrown off, and now we got the baby coming, so I've been trying not to, gas myself out. But yeah,
Yep.
I stopped, and I'm like, well, now it's hard every time. It's hard to get, start back up again. So I think especially once my son gets here, I'm like, I ain't stopping for no one. I was like, it doesn't matter if it's 2 writing sprints a day where it's at. Could do it
Yep.
on crayon on the wall, like it's gonna get done. So yeah, I
Yeah.
totally understand that. Well, that's really exciting, Jake. Yeah, like I said, before, like if there's anything that we can do at all, to help you out, I will be sending out some topics for seminars um,
Ooh.
that in our newsletter. So like I said, I'll be sending that email out. Sorry, fans. It's only news. It's a newsletter we're gonna do a separate one for you guys. It's gonna be a newsletter for alumni of the podcast. So that way authors will keep coming back to us and do really cool things. It's a way for us to help them out with some different things. So we'll be sharing that news with you guys in different avenues from these different authors. But like I said, if there's anything I can do, around that or, in the spring or whatever, just let me know. I am going to be taking tentative dates for the spring for season 3 that'll come out after Labor Day weekend. So we're hoping to have, quite a few things this summer, like early spring through the summer, recorded and stuff like we did this year. That
Yeah.
would try to stay ahead. I'll be releasing in the fall, so like late fall, so with a couple of things, couple of books, couple novellas. So
Oof.
yeah, so but yeah, let me
Busy.
know. Yeah, trying. I just have this like I just want my son when he's actually able to understand what's going on, be like, my dad's an author. Like my dad's an author. Like and, like my buddy and I, we just have this great idea. We're just like in our head, we just like want to take him to Comic Cons with us and stuff, dress up, do whatever. We want to like rub elbows with you and all the other authors. I just think that'd be, such a cool way to grow up personally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always get jealous of Jim Butcher and his son. So yeah, we're hoping that we can try and speed that along a little bit, if you will.
Yeah,
But
there you go.
don't worry, Jake. We'll let him write what he wants to write. Doesn't have to be fantasy, but we're hoping. So. All
And
right, Jake.
remember, it's he's not born yet. You could still go with Jake.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I'll go upstairs right now. I'll talk to my wife. We'll see what she has to say. So usually wins though, so we'll see what she says. But but yeah, Jake, if there's anything I can do at all, my friend, you just hit me up on social media, hit me up on Facebook, email me. I'm here. Find me, and I'll help you out as best I can.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, Jake, have a great rest of the night, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. I'll be sending you an email by next Sunday, and we'll get this going for you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man.
Perfect. Have a good one, Jake.
Yeah, you too, buddy.
See you.